Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
Designing a dental office requires some knowledge of the desirable characteristics of each element of the dental office so that maximum efficiency can be incorporated in the master plan. Here to discuss these characteristics is Mr. Al Chiesa, owner of an architectural firm in Birmingham, Alabama. Al, there are some basic characteristics of each of these elements of a dental office that I'd be interested in addressing, if we can. Things like room size, its location, doorways, lighting, windows, where equipment should be located, and that sort of thing. How do you feel about those kinds of features relative to the dental operatory?
The most important aspects of the design of an operatory are probably the arrangement of the different elements inside the operatory, number one. Number two, the size of the room or area into which these different elements are arranged. And number three, the means of access into the operatory for the different elements of, or the different components of the dental team.
Let's talk about room size. How much space do we need?
Generally, for most conditions, an operatory of about 9 feet wide by 11 feet long is very adequate.
How do you arrive at those figures?
By placing in an efficient and convenient arrangement the different elements that are incorporated into the operatory.
Why not 10 feet wide, 11 feet wide?
You want the operatory to be wide enough, since we're talking about width, and yet not too wide. There are things that are placed on the side of the operatory that need to be reached without the operators having to get up to go get them.
Or roll on their operating stool to have access to those.
That is correct.
Length, why 11 feet?
11 feet seems to be a very convenient size. Actually, the length is not critical. It's less critical than the width. A room that is too wide may have a little bit of wasted space at the foot of the chair. This may not be a big problem.
If we can visualize the length of an operatory with the dental chair in supine position and a back wall or obstruction behind the head of the dental chair, what kind of space do you feel should be left between that wall and the head of the dental chair to get the operator in and out of that space?
I like to think in terms of 4 feet.
4 feet.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of lighting of the operatory, not speaking of the operating light itself, which is 15 to 1700 foot candles, what are your thoughts on the general room lighting of an operatory?
Amount and quality are important here, Joe. I think you need to have sufficient amount of light, probably in the order of 150 foot candles, and quality is important. I would like to say that we are lately going more and more to indirect illumination because it's so much easier on the eyes of the operators.
Is color quality of the light important?
Yes, it is to a certain extent, and depending on the type of procedures that you are conducting.
Do you find that dentists are buying color-corrected lighting fixtures or bulbs specifically for installation in operatories?
That is correct.
What do you mean by indirect lighting relative to its application to an operatory?
Indirect lighting is the opposite of what we have in this situation right here, Joe. It's a situation where the operator cannot see the light source.
And it's bounced off the ceiling?
It's bounced off the ceiling, off part of the light fixture itself, off the walls, in such a manner that it reaches the operator or the area that is intended to be illuminated through an indirect path.
Considering access by the operating team into the operatory and out of the operatory to move about the office in some pattern of traffic, also considering the patient moving in and out of treatment areas, what are your thoughts on doorways, the number of doorways, their arrangement, size, that sort of thing?
Usually there's 3 members of the process involved, sometimes 4. That is, there is the patient, number 1. There is the dentist, number 2. There is assistant, number 3, and possibly a second assistant. It is very possible that each one of the members of this group accesses the operatory through a different door or area from a different direction.
What kind of configuration do you think is effective for moving all of these people in and out as they need to move in and out of a given operatory?
The patient has to have easy access to the operatory in such a manner that it provides a private view of the operatory area. By that I mean that it is very appropriate if the entrance to the operatory area for the patient is such that he cannot observe other patients under treatment. From the staff point of view, access means an area in which there is sufficient space and access to the proper side of the chair.
Would you be suggesting then that we really have separate access points for the staff and the patient?
Yes, that's exactly right, Joe.
Is that an attempt on your part when you're designing a facility to have a staff doorway or pathway in and out of the treatment area and a patient pathway in and out of the treatment area?
More and more offices are being designed that way.
Is size of the door critical? Is there a standard door size that's generally used for the patient to get in and out?
Yes, a door that is 2 foot 8 inches wide seems to be very convenient, and it also allows entry by patients in wheelchairs.
I've noticed in looking at some designs of facilities that there seems to be a variance in how dental radiography is accomplished in an office. Some offices have the x-ray machine in a central area and patients go through a screening process, and they don't have supplemental x-ray machines in each operatory, while others do just the opposite. They have a machine in every room. The issue of how we can reduce the cost of having machines available in each room is certainly something I'm interested in. Secondly, how do we accomplish adequate protection for all of the people that are in the facility for radiation? I'm interested in your comments on that.
You have to provide adequate screening. That is, if the patient cannot see other treatment areas, you could pretty well assume that that particular operatory area would be safe for x-rays.
What about machines in each room? Do you find that when you're designing a facility that you are in fact putting x-ray machines in each room, or are you sharing an x-ray machine between 2 rooms?
I think in most practices having access to an x-ray machine in each treatment area is indicated. You can do this by, of course, placing one in each operatory or by sharing.
I noticed in one of your designs that you had actually constructed a cabinet between operatories, that the arm of the x-ray machine would swing into each operatory that was adjacent to this wall between, in an attempt to get 2 rooms of use out of one machine. Is that a common?
Yes, it is a very
approach?
common arrangement, Joe, because of course it limits the overall number of units that we have to use.
How do you feel about nitrous oxide and its location, the plumbing and the regulator and that sort of thing that is required? Where should that be physically placed in a dental operatory?
What we like to do, Joe, is to mount the flow meter on the mobile cabinet in such a manner that is accessible to both the doctor and the assistant. And this allows us to decrease dependence on a back wall in the operatory. We do not have to have, in other words, a back wall immediately adjacent to the chair, which is meant to be there to support the flow meter. And in turn, this opens up the back of the operatory.
Where do you get the access to the plumbing? Is that through the junction box with the rest of the services, or where do you put the plumbing for the oxygen and the nitrous oxide?
We like to do this at a point in the floor, immediately behind the mobile cabinet.
Are those quick disconnect types of fittings, or are those fixed fittings that the hoses are always attached to those?
Well, if you have flow meters in each one of the treatment areas, the need for a quick disconnect is less important.
We were talking about lighting a few moments ago, and I'm wondering how you feel about natural lighting, windows, and the light that provides, whether that's desirable, where windows should be placed relative to the head of the chair, skylighting, or whether that type of lighting is in fact detrimental. Too much natural lighting, morning sun coming into the treatment area and so forth.
The quality of natural light is very helpful. It's very good in the operatory. You cannot rely on natural lighting to help provide the necessary amount of illumination because you may be working under night conditions. The most important aspect, I believe, of natural lighting is that it creates a more pleasing environment for both the team and the patient.
How many operatories do you think a starter office should have? First day I'm opening the office, how many of these facilities should I have to treat patients?
We like to design offices with 4 treatment rooms, even on a starter office. It may very well be that only 2 would be equipped to start with. But if you're constructing a new office, you should allow for at least that number, because once you have moved in, it's almost impossible to add, modify, or expand that office. So you should make allowances for at least that number.
One of the major support areas of the operatory or treatment area is the sterilization room. Where should that be located relative to the treatment rooms?
You know, we said that the operatories have actually 2 sides. They have the patient side and the staff side. We like to locate the support areas, such as the sterilization area, on the staff side of the operatories, and as close as possible, of course.
Is there some formula that you use in terms of room size for the sterilization area?
I think the key element here is work surfaces, not floor space. You should allow yourself an adequate amount of work surface in order that the process of sterilization can take place in an orderly fashion.
In a facility like that, do you create space for holding areas for contaminated trays and holding areas for process trays that are ready to go back for use?
That is correct, Joe. You know, we said that to go back, one of the most important goals is to create an adequate environment. In this particular case, what is an adequate environment for sterilizing? Well, you have to break down the process. What is the process of sterilization? You bring in a load of dirty trays, You open them up, you clean instruments, you scrub them, you reset the trays, you autoclave them, and then you store them. So each one of these steps ought to have a place in the sterilization area so that the process can continue in a easy manner.
How about the dental laboratory? I would assume that your thinking would be similar in a dental laboratory. Different procedures being done in a laboratory.
Yes, I'd like to say this, Joe. It helps in the planning process to create a drawing where all these different areas or steps are indicated in as much detail as possible so that sufficient and adequate space is provided. In other words, what I'm saying is you should have probably a floor plan or a drawing showing the countertops with each one of the pieces of equipment shown at a large scale.
I want to get very specific with this inquiry here. When you look at such areas as laboratory, sterilization area, they are essentially a laboratory type setting. By that I mean there's storage cabinets above and below a counter space. What height should we have for the counter height? And how high above that counter height should the cabinets begin?
Well, I like to think that each lab should have two kinds of heights as far as working counters. We'd like to create a sit-down work area, which should be approximately 28 inches off the floor, so that the operator can sit down in a normal position, not in a high stool with his feet off the floor. And of course you need some stand-up working areas, which are usually 36 to 38 inches off the floor.
Al, the dental business office is a very important area, of course. What are some of the critical features that should be incorporated in the design?
Size and arrangement of the business office are critical. In terms of size, I like to allow at least 70 to 100 square feet per person in the business office. Arrangement-wise, you like to provide multi-height countertops for sit-down areas, for stand-up areas at the appointment counter, and for typing areas. You also would like to have a very open part of the business office so that patients can be greeted appropriately, and private areas so that business can be conducted, recalls, collection calls, and payment.
How do you feel about the communication system within the office? Where should it be located in the business office? Light chime systems, signaling devices that patients are here, or broken appointments, that sort of thing.
Let me say this, Joe. The business office ought to be designed in the same manner that we discussed for the sterilization area. You should break down the different functions that are, or tasks that are going to be performed, and allow space for each one. You should build into the counter areas or desk areas convenient storage space for different forms, patient history form, payment forms, or slips, and also for the different communication devices that are necessary in the office: telephones, light intercoms, nitrous oxide low pressuring alarm system. And this I like to build into the countertop very close to the position where the receptionist is.
Al, I'd like to continue our discussion on the various elements of the dental office, such as the reception area, the prevention area, utility rooms, that sort of thing, plus a discussion of bringing it all together in a floor plan as we continue this series on office design.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.